We will have up first Ademola Akinbobola. Second, it will be Dorcas Muigereri. Third, it will be Elisha Abadi. Fourth, it will be Elvis Tanyu. And number 5 will be Ibrahim Sanogo. And number 6 will be Ida Oro. So those are the presenters that you will be scoring in this first session. So please give them a round of applause for being willing to take up this presentation slots. Thanks so much. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ademola Akinbobola from the Federal University of Technology, Akure, Nigeria. I want to make a presentation on intra-urban heat vulnerability assessment in Lagos, a geospatial data science. We know that everyone lives in the atmosphere, especially within the boundary layer, which is about 1 kilometer to 4 kilometers up. And we know theoretically that the sun releases energy, shortwave radiation, and when it hits the surface, it sends back shortwave radiation, long wave radiation, which these characteristics of the environment will determine the amount of energy that will be retained. Therefore, we are having a lot of variation. It will be unfair, even within a city, to assume that the entire city has the same characteristics. That is why it is necessary to look at, different urban structures within a city. We look at the LCZ, which is local climate zone, and that local climate zone is a generic way to classify cities in terms of urban forms. And this is drawn from WUDAP, which is being generated, which is the World Urban Database for, other urban database tools, which is being used to classify the cities. So this research work made use of geospatial data, and Lagos was classified using local climate zone. And at the end, 10 were classified. We have the first one, the second one, the third one to the 10th one. And after that, we discovered that our finding underscore significant heat risk within urbanized local climate zone with local climate zone 3, which is compact low-rise, local climate 6, which is open low-rise, and local climate 7, which is lightweight low-rise. And again, further examination reveals that densely populated urban region, notably local climate zone 6 and 7, constitute substantial portions of the high-risk zone, followed by local climate zone 3. Significantly, these high-risk zones clearly align with well-known slums and informal settlements in Lagos, reinforcing the imperative for targeted interventions and strategic planning measures for heat-related issues. Our study reveals the profound magnitude and the extent of heat risk prevailing in the city. Now, if any intervention wants to come, it has to be based on the result, because different urban form has different heat stress. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Dorcas Mugereri from Nairobi, Kenya, and affiliated with the Uzima project. I'll be presenting a proposal of a study we intend to take, which is, it involves antenatal risk prediction of gestational diabetes mellitus in the first and second trimester using machine learning algorithm. So I'll start off with the statistics. It is seen that the global statistics of women who suffer from GDM globally is at 2% to 10% annually. When you narrow down to Africa, the statistics is at 13.6%, with a specific 4.4% in sub-Saharan Africa. That is seen to be a high statistics, considering most of the women don't often undergo GDM screening, as it's not part of the antenatal screening. The risks of GDM cannot be underrated because, number one, women who suffer from GDM are at risk of prolonged labor, preeclampsia, and developing type 2 diabetes. In infants, this is seen to affect them in terms of preterm delivery and microsomia. In our study, we saw that exposure to these adverse effects of the in utero environment is likely to affect both short-term and long-term health effects of an individual. Recent studies have shown that GDM has adversely affected both the cardiovascular dysfunction in fetus and brain programming. Thus, it's important to have a mechanism to develop a system for early prediction of GDM so that we can avert or prevent some of the short-term delivery risk and long-term effects that include metabolic and cardiovascular diseases. Our study will employ a cross-sectional study design with a specific methodology that is the knowledge in database discovery that will involve processes such as collecting data, cleaning the data, and analyzing, then later interpreting it to give results that will be used for policy making. Eligible subjects will be considered to be the singleton pregnancies, and we will exclude participants who already have type 1 and type 2 diabetes. The specific aims of our study is to, one, identify the risk factors of GDM. Number two, to develop a machine learning algorithm for early prediction of GDM. And number three, to validate our model. We will be using data obtained from Aga Khan University, the electronic health record system. And the data has been recorded from January 2010, to December 2021. And as I've mentioned below on how the criteria will use to consider the eligible subjects and the subjects that we will be excluding from this study. So what do we expect from this study? One, our findings will enable us to easily identify some of the risk factors of GDM development. And number two, will contribute to the body of knowledge on GDM by developing a model for early prediction, and thus enable it be a bit easier to conduct GDM screening during the antenatal care. I have provided a map, as you can see there, that shows the prevalence. I'm not quite sure if the statistics are quite visible, but I'll share these probably after. That shows the GDM prevalence according to continents. So that is quite useful. And as I've said, our concentration for now is in Kenya. And it's also worth noting that the same research has been done in Karachi, AKU, and we intend also to compare some of the risk factors that will be identified in Karachi and also some of the risk factors that will be identified in Kenya and try to see if there's any discrepancies and why it exists. So mine is a proposal. It's a study that we intend to undertake. And yeah, I think I've presented most of the things. Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, my name is Elisha Abade from the University of Nairobi, Kenya. I'm affiliated to AFREA DST project. I'm going to be presenting about a study that is in the earlier stages on a machine learning approach to strengthening health systems through robust immunization programs. So this study is actually being done within the AfroADST project, but also in collaboration with the USAID funded project referred to as Health IT, also located within the University of Nairobi. So immunization is one of the most important health interventions, which is known to have a number of significant advantages, including reduction of disabilities, reduction of deaths, and even reducing disease burdens. And nonetheless, 2021 research by UNICEF revealed that there is still a lot to be done when it comes to immunization, whereby there are a number of children who are either under-immunized or not immunized at all. In that report, they are referred to as zero-dose children. And a significant number of these actually come from sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, the report says that 20% of the 8.7 million children who are zero dose, that means they were not immunized at all, are actually from Southern Africa. The report details even the countries where they are from, but I've not covered them here. In addition to this, Kenyan government rolled out a free immunization program for children. But we still recognize that there are some cases of defaulters. So this study seeks to, number one, use machine learning approach and concentrate on area-specific indicators within Kenya to identify and quantify the factors that contribute to vaccine apathy, and also to generate models for predicting and identifying immunization defaulters in Kenya. But then, of course, the key thing is also to come up with intervention mechanisms that the Ministry of Health could apply to ensure that the defaulters are tracked and appropriate measures taken so that we reduce these statistics. So our approach to this study is to use data from EMRs. The project that I've mentioned that is funded by USAID, one of the things that it has done across Kenya is to roll out EMR, referred to as Kenya EMR, across a number of government facilities. So we'll be leveraging on that data and also other data from the surveys by the Ministry of Health, as well as socioeconomic data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. So the approach will be to pre-process this data. First of all, of course, is to look at the ones that have duplicates with missing values and handle them accordingly, perform discretization, and also decode the data. Then we envisage that this data is actually going to be coming from a number of sources, so many different attributes. So we'll select appropriate attributes and then apply machine learning algorithms, selection on the 2080 basis for testing and training, then apply label assignment to this data, and then build the various models that we'll use, among them, of course, support vector machines, DTs, and so on and so forth. Then for the 20%, we'll actually use for testing, basically evaluate this model based on a number of matrices, including precision, recall, among others, and then apply the models for prediction. I've mentioned that this study is going to be looking at area-specific indicators. So some of the attributes that we'll be looking at include the population in an area. The unit we are looking at is counties in Kenya. Population density in that county, the number of population that is below 2 years, and also we'll be looking at socioeconomic specific variables or attributes, including the maternal age, that's the age of the mother of the children, the level of education, and also not forgetting religion, because some of the issues have been reported previously to be attributed to religion in Kenya. Thank you. That's the study.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elvis Tanwe, and I'm from the University of Buea in Cameroon. And this project is under Design Africa. I'm happy to share our presentation on pre-hospital care and outcomes of motorcycle-related injuries. This is a preliminary analysis of CTR data. We know that there is an increased use in motorcycles as a means of transportation, and this is associated with road traffic, with an increase in road traffic injuries in Cameroon. And according to the WHO, it is possible for over 50% of traumatic death to be preventable with effective pre-hospital care. And as an objective, we evaluated the pre-hospital care patterns and outcomes of motorcycle-related injuries in order to inform pre-hospital care development in Cameroon, which is presently very poor, as we'll see in the results. We analyze a prospective data from the Cameroon Trauma Registry, which is actually a registry that is implemented in 10 hospitals across 7 of the 10 regions of the country. And this data we're presenting, it was accumulated over a period of 12 months from May 2022 to from June 2022 to May 2023. We utilized the multivariate logistic regression to evaluate association of pre-hospital care and hospital mortality. Our results, as you can see on figure 1, majority of the injuries of road traffic were as a result of where it had to do with motorcycle use. That is 73%. Those mostly affected, we have males that are mostly affected, 80%. We have the active age group of the population, 16 to 49 years, mostly affected with 79%. And interestingly, for motorcycle users, only 3% of them had utilized helmet at the point of injury. And pre-hospital care was only administered to 4% of those that were involved in the motorcycle-related injuries. And interestingly, this pre-hospital care is mostly administered by bystanders. Figure 2 shows the pre-hospital care that are provided, mostly majority being pressure to control bleeding and fracture immobilization. As table 1 shows us, although prior work shows pre-hospital care is associated with survival to the hospital, transport by private car and motorcycles, and initial pre-hospital care being provided by persons that are involved in the injury scene are factors, as opposed to those that were not involved in the injury scene, are factors that are actually associated with hospital mortality in this study. As a conclusion, few motorcycle-related injuries receive pre-hospital care, and this pre-hospital care are mostly provided by bystanders, which are the persons not involved in the injury. So, standardizing pre-hospital care and lay first responders program will be instrumental to improve the trauma outcomes in Cameroon. We acknowledge all the patients included in the study, and especially the NIH that funded the study. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ibrahim Sanro from Mali. I'm physician and biostatistician of University Clinical Research Center. Today, it's my pleasure to be here and talk to you about machine learning diagnostic approaches for adult malaria cases. This is a retrospective study of clinical data in Mali from 2013 to 2021. As we know, in high endemic in high transmission setting, adults tend to have a milder malaria clinical symptom than children. This may be partially explained by the difference rate in positivity rate in rapid diagnostic testing during passive case detection activities. We know also use of machine learning, use of machine learning approach to predict malaria in adult is very slow. Now our objective, the main aim of this study, it was to propose a novel machine learning approach for complementing and optimizing RDT for malaria detection, and also apply this approach to a cohort of subject using an historical anemic data from our study seat of Dangasa in Mali. I would like to present the main method. We start by extract data from the West Africa asthma database for 2,660 visit from 65 patients, and the data has been cleaned, and we built for machine learning model, and we to try to predict the likelihood of having malaria among adult cohort. Before building the model, we split our data by 70% training and 30% testing. Our four model has been evaluated for their accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score, and their performance as compared with using IUC value. As you can see on the figure 1, IAB, random forest and supervisor machine show the high performance in malaria prediction, and also these two model were more accurate in adult malaria prediction. We main clinical characteristic for informing our algorithms was body temperature, heart rate, density, and so on, as you can see on figure 2. I want to conclude by that machine learning model approach have a considerable potential for improving and complementing rapid diagnostic testing approach. But however, optimizing current rapid diagnostic testing activity may provide lower cost, more mobility solution than laboratory-based diagnostic approaches. By the future, we would like to use this result for expanding machine learning approach to over malaria endemic location. Finally, I would like to do acknowledgement to ISMR program team led by Professor Seru Dumbia, Dangasa study community, and study participant and the legal representative, DSA Africa Coordinating Center for the organization and big job. And thank you so much.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ida Roy. I'm from the University of Nairobi, and I'm associated to the AFRIA DST project. My work is on estimating time to viral suppression among people or patients on ARTs and associated factors. Now, I'm more of a statistician, and I just recently got introduced to machine learning. So this is the first, maybe the first work that I want to do using machine learning methods. So we know that HIV is it's a common disease, more so in Africa, and it comes with its challenges. Now, to treat HIV/AIDS, we need ARTs, which is antiretroviral therapy, and you find that for it to be successful, you must adhere to it. And it takes a while before you get viral suppression, because the antiretroviral therapy enables you to get viral suppression. We know that of late, like Kenya was in the right track to be able to control HIV and AIDS, but of late we find that there's been an increase in number of people having HIV and AIDS in spite of being in antiretroviral therapy. So my interest is to find out, why is this happening? Why is there change from reducing the effectiveness to now sort of trying to increase the effectiveness? So my main objectives is to identify the factors that will influence time to viral suppression. And then the second one is to obtain the best algorithm to identify those who will achieve viral suppression and those at high risk of not achieving it. Then the third objective is to predict the time to achieving viral suppression. And then lastly, to estimate the percentage of patients who will achieve viral suppression. Now, I managed to do this using the traditional statistical methods. And using that, I found that the estimated time to achieving viral suppression was 2 years for the data that I used, because this was data from a county hospital somewhere in Kenya, in a place known as Kisumu. It involved 440 patients, and they were followed for a period of 7 years from 2015 to 2022. And then when we estimated using Kaplan-Meier and Cox proportional hazard models, we found that the mean time to achieving viral suppression once you are on ART is 2 years. But now I want to compare this estimate with using methods the machine learning methods that I'm currently learning. So so what I'll do, I have the data. So first of all, I'll definitely have to process the data, and then I'll divide that data into training and testing. And then I'll develop the algorithms, and the algorithms that I intend to use are, for example, the survival support vector machines, the random survival forest, and the k-nearest neighbors, and maybe any other that maybe I'll also include. And then after that, I'll try and select the best model or the best algorithm. And then from there now, I'll test that algorithm and see if it works well in predicting the factors, right? So the model accuracy will be checked using the testing data and evaluated so that I choose a final model and algorithm. Now the chosen algorithm will be checked for consistent results with a theoretical model, which is from the training data. Now we know that understanding factors influencing time to viral suppression is critical for predictive purposes, optimizing treatment outcomes, and improving HIV management strategies. Thank you very much.
All right, great. So now the floor is open for questions. Any of the speakers? Henry, just wait for the microphone.
My question regards the person who presented data on deliveries, and he or she said that they're going to use singleton deliveries and they leave out the multiple ones, does it mean that data now you are going to throw it away, or is it going to be used in another way to inform the solution to the problem in one way or the other, or maybe in the future? Thank you.
Press the button. Okay, thank you for the question. And it's important for me to clarify that my background is in computer science, but I'll try to answer it in a more medical way based on my understanding. So we narrowed down to the singleton pregnancy, and that is due because of the kind of data we have in the EHR. So we actually try to study our data, try to see some of the variables that were there. It's not that we'll get rid of the data, but we are first of all starting with a pilot project, which will later on expand to that. So we'll also take into consideration that. But currently we are working with what is available.
Yes, I have a question for the last presenter. I wanted to understand how censoring was incorporated. I mean, in the traditional models, modeling time to an event usually incorporates censoring. Within the machine learning models, how is censoring accounted for? And then the last but one, the one on malaria, he talked about proposing a novel machine learning model, but amongst the models that you presented, I was not sure where the novelty was coming in, if you can clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. My work is in the proposal stage, right? And I'm going to use survival support vector machine method. And I believe survival support vector machine method, since it's geared towards, it's modified for survival data, it incorporates censoring into it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. The world model novel is not for the machine learning model, also is the use of the innovative approach to predict malaria in the area of malaria prediction. It's not for the concerning the model machine learning algorithm we are using. Thank you.
One last question.
Thanks. So my question is for this first speaker, Edimola, about your project. So you linked heat to the slums in Lagos. Yep. And then the title says heat and health. So have you connected any health impact in those areas? And it wasn't, I don't know if it was shown on your presentation yet.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's when we have it, definitely heat-related diseases is expected. For example, let's use malaria, for example. When the temperature is less than 16 degrees, malaria does not exist or sparingly exists. So if at some optimum temperature, maybe between 30 and 35, which is the optimum, I'm just hypothesizing. So if the heat, if the temperature within that environment favors some heat-related disease like chickenpox, measles, so there will be prevalent of that disease. Thank you.
Hello.
So have you actually tested that? What the temperatures you have you tested it?
I can't.
So I'm asking, do you actually have those results when you're linking the temperature with the disease prevalence in that area? Have you shown that already?
No, it's still general that heat-related diseases will be prevalent within that environment. Thank you.
We have only time for one more question. We have another set of, so I will let you go.
Thank you very much. I have a question for the last presenter. And it is an innovative way to study the virus suppression. My question is, when you see the time of the cohort, it is a long time and a lot of interventions, changing medications, changing behaviors may happen that time. So how do you account for such changes while you are doing an analysis?
Okay, thank you. I think that those are some of the factors that we'll be looking at, and then we'll select the most important factor. So you'll find that maybe there's some factors that are incorporated, like changing, but probably it's not as important. So what will determine what will be in our model are the factors that are really important and relevant. So some factors might be dropped if they're not really relevant. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our session for this group one presenters. Please give them a round of applause. And with that, I'll call our next group of presenters to the stage, please. Group two. If you could, please try and sit in the order of presentation. All right, so for this group, we have Joy who will present for us, Coyote next, and then it will be Anliki. Unfortunately, Ronald could not join us for this meeting. And then second last, we will have Sherlyn, Demura, and then lastly, we will have Claude come out. So we will start with Joy. Joy, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joy Zialesi Atokle, and I'm presenting on a systematic review on the computational methods of assessing speech disorders in cleft palate patients. I'm affiliated to the D-Exchange project and from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Orofacial clefts are the third most occurring congenital deformities in the world. One of the effects of this deformity is that even after the initial surgery to correct this deformity, these patients are faced with speech disorders. And the traditional way of assessing these speech disorders is by a speech pathologist listening to these patients and detecting the errors in the speech. This approach is mostly centered on the speech pathologist experience and is most often subjective. Aside this, it has limitations in the form of being tedious, time-consuming, and lack of availability of speech pathologists in most areas. So this led us to ask the question, what are the existing computational methods in assessing these speech disorders, which will be more objective and better than the traditional approach? So we developed our protocol based on the PRISPA 2020 review protocol. We included all papers from 2013 to 2023, and we excluded all papers that are in languages other than English. So from our comprehensive search and screening, we included 25 papers to the study. And we extracted our data based on these questions: the language of assessment, the number of speech samples used, the method used, and also the accuracies that were obtained. So to our findings, we noticed that there were varied speech samples. We had as little as 11 and as high as 14,544. And we also identified that 98% of these papers only used 98% used papers that used data sets that were available in their location, while only 2% used data sets that were publicly available. So in terms of method, we noticed that 84% of the included papers use acoustic analysis methods in addition to machine learning methods. And we also noticed that 16% of the included papers use deep learning methods. The highest accuracy we recorded was 96.1%. Then the last thing we looked at was the language of assessment. This is because with the world's language being over 7,000, we wanted to study how many of these languages have been included in the computational methods of assessment of speech disorders. We identified 6 languages, with Mandarin having the highest proportion. From these findings, we noticed 3 gaps. The first is that there was no cross-linguistic comparison, and none of these papers were tested on different languages, so we cannot ascertain if these results will still, if we will still obtain these results if we use it on different languages. The other thing is that we did not identify any African language. And the third thing is that most people in Africa are bilingual, but we did not identify any paper that did a bilingual computational method of assessment. So leveraging on these insights, we intend to develop an automatic multilingual speech assessment tool that will be included in clinical settings and will give a more objective way of assessing speech disorders. So in conclusion, incorporating computational methods in speech assessment of cleft palate patients is a good and has great potential and would be good for improving diagnostic accuracy. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kayode from the Madiba Research Hub, South Africa, and I'll be presenting this very long topic, which is basically on machine learning explainable platforms for predicting CVD mobility in Africa. So the first thing we are looking at here is to talk about CVD mobility, which is a complex compound chronic condition that is affected, that is affecting the healthcare systems, and also it's also related to mortality rates. So the good thing here now is that we now have machine learning models that have been developed to predict conditions like this. However, this implementation is faced with the acceptability issues, and that is why we should have things now like explainable frameworks, and this is why I'm doing this study. So the objective is just right there, which is the development of an explainable framework to interpret the predictions from machine learning models. So how are we doing this? The block diagram just below the first column shows the process, which is mostly of the traditional regular machine learning pipeline. The key point here to note is the last block, which is the SHARP framework. And we're moving on to which data set we've used. It's from the origin data set, and we've used most of the population across sub-Saharan Africa from the ages of 40 to 65. One important thing to note here is the definition of CVD mobility, and we've defined it as the presence of CVD and any other conditions, which include diabetes, hypertension, and chronic kidney disease. Moving on to the results. The first part of the results is the global explanations, and straight up into the first side, which is a cohort plot. The first part is telling us about the different stratifications and the feature importance of those stratifications. And just to pick up on just one, which is the BMI. So the BMI, we can see here that the BMI, the machine learning model has predicted or has used BMI as a much more important feature to predict CVD mobility for men than for women. On the other side, we stratified BMI according to just two groups, the lower value groups and the lower value groups. And we can use that same explanation to understand what's going on there. So on the third column, just right up there, we've got a summary plot. So the summary plot here explains the difference between, it explains how the predictions have been made. And one of the things that we can see there is that BMI with different data points has high values that are being, which actually means that BMI with high values tend to get predictions of high risk CVD multimorbidity. Then we move on to the last part, which is the local explanations. And that's the last pair of, and that's the last set of images. So we can see there that we've got BMI, physical activities, and others to present or to represent a decision to make a high-risk CVD multimorbidity. And the one on the right-hand side also has different values that I can't see clearly right now. But the whole idea is that if you see quite a lot of blues, it could mean that the summation of those blues would represent the generation of the prediction. And we can see just the red on that blue spots. It generates high risk, but it's not enough to give it a high risk prediction. So in conclusion, I would say that this study is actually very useful for cases of personalized medicine. And if you're able to successfully do this, it will actually enhance, the personalized medicine in the African population. And we hope to present, we hope to publish this in the nearest future. I think that's it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eliki Edgecombe. I am at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and very proudly associated with the DSI Africa Law Group. And that might be an unusual title for a lawyer to stand up and tell you about, AI-powered chatbot as a legal guidance tool. But I couldn't let all the scientists in the room have all the fun. And, our lawyers, we like to stick our fingers into every pie. And so I'm going to be telling you about a project where I tried to train a chatbot to answer some questions for you. So why did I go on this expedition? Well, on the reading that I've done, I've realized that Africa has 25% of the global disease burden, and we're looking at 2.1% of global health research coming out of Africa. I mean, the disparity is actually quite shocking. And why is that? Kind of in the reading, I expected people to say the usual things, which is lack of resources. And those were definitely on the list, the top of the list of researchers within Africa. But what I didn't expect to find was that the number 2 cited reason why health researchers aren't actually conducting health research on the continent has to do with the ethical and regulatory system obstacles. So basically, people don't understand what they have to do. And if you're sitting in this room, you probably feel that kind of frustration. And so obviously the role of lawyers to be able to simplify the laws and help with cross-border data sharing becomes absolutely vital. And so while I was doing my research, and our research group looks at 12 African countries, English-speaking African countries, and clarifies the laws in those areas, I thought, well, what are the chances that health researchers like you in this room are ever going to read what I write? Ever going to read those long, lengthy documents? I'm hoping you will, because they will be very useful. But the chances are you're going to be tempted by something like ChatGPT. And I thought, why not just see if I could make something that might appeal to you as scientists, that you could just plunk in your question and pops, the answer out. And that's really what I wanted to do, is empower health researchers with a legal chatbot. So there are obviously some question marks around that. And if you were here earlier and you heard Akbar's presentation from Uzima, you'll actually see that we can't really trust everything ChatGPT has to say. So we have to make sure that how we train it is, very well thought through. But of course, we know from research that has been happening that, in fact, it can be a very useful tool in terms of giving legal advice. So what did I do? I carefully curated all the data protection laws in those 12 African countries. In fact, only 9 have a Data Protection Act in place. 3 did not. So those are a little bit more tricky for us to make use of. I then employed the expert skills of a 22-year-old who ends up being a ChatGPT AI specialist, as they all come in 20-year-old packages. And he helped me to build this chatbot where we would train it specifically on this very specific curated data set. Then I had the help of a legal research team. And what they did is ask this chatbot questions multiple times, because every time you're going to get a different answer. We had to grade those answers in terms of helpfulness, accuracy, harmfulness, and actually retrain that bot on that data. So really, it was a constant loop of ever-increasing accuracy. And finally, we have a beta version, a starting point for you as scientists to use. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to pitch it to you so that you can use it, ask it questions, and see what kind of outputs you're getting. And really what I want is your questions so I can better train it. Because ultimately, like training a dog, if I've only trained it to sit, that's all it's going to be able to do. I want to know what your questions are so I can better train it. Our initial results are actually very promising. Most of the questions that we ask it based on those data protection acts, it's able to answer pretty accurately. But really, this version, we are trying to integrate our country guides and our reports, so it is far more useful for you as scientists in the room. So please give it a go. The QR code is there, and I'd love your feedback. Thank you very much.
Pleasant afternoon, everyone. My name is Shalene Dumbura. I'm from Sesha in Zimbabwe, affiliated with the HEAT Center, and I'm also a research fellow at the Place-Alert Labs at the Midland State University, which is affiliated with the PRECISE study. I'm going to be presenting to you a proposal of the work that I want to carry out, which is along with the HEAT group and the PRECISE team, exploring variability in heat exposure characterization, a comparative analysis of different exposure assignment methods. So globally, we know that 5 million deaths can be attributed to climate change. This includes extreme temperatures as well as natural disasters that are occurring across the globe. And 37% of these deaths can be attributed to extreme heat or extreme cold. So most of the vulnerable populations that have been identified to date are the elderly, the children, as well as pregnant mothers. So many studies have been carried out to look at what is the relationship between heat exposure during someone's gestational period and the maternal outcomes that happen. For example, stillbirth or preterm birth or having a low birth weight baby. So the downside is that many of these studies have used various ways of assigning heat exposure to the women. So we're not really able to generalize the findings that they have seen. So my study aims to look at the various location variables that have been used to assign heat exposure to a pregnant woman. So in some studies, you can find that they assign heat using the woman's residence or the health facility that they visit during pregnancy and the ANC visits, or the village level of that woman. So because of this, the amount of heat that the woman experiences is going to differ. And we know that, according to where the location is, if there are structures, if there are vegetation, the temperatures that someone is going to experience are going to be different. So we are suggesting or proposing to suggest, is there a standard way that we can actually assign exposures to women so that our results become generalizable across all our research? So in terms of the methods, we looked for the coordinates, whether it was the village level coordinate of the woman in a pregnancy cohort for a study that was carried out in Kenya, Gambia, and Mozambique. So we assigned according to the coordinates that we had available in the data set, the heat that the location variable, and we are going to try and match that to the heat that someone is going to experience. So we took the mean monthly temperature from satellite data sets, ERA 5 MODIS, as well as Landsat, and we are going to compare the variation within the heat exposures that someone experiences according to which location variable is used to assign their heat exposure. We're going to link this with the woman's maternal and neonatal outcomes that they experience, and then we can propose or add to the body of knowledge which one is the most standard method to use. So progress to date, we have assigned heat exposures for the mothers and mapped location variables. That means that assigning the location and the coordinates so that we can link that with the heat that occurred in that point in time. Data cleaning and analysis is in progress. Next step, we're going to carry out cross-validation techniques to compare the heat exposure methods and also look at spatial autocorrelation to measure how exposure methods capture spatial patterns differently. So according to someone's location, how accurately is it estimating the heat exposure that she experienced during the gestational period, whether it is the location of the village or the location of the health facility she visits or where she stays. We anticipate that results from this work will enhance the understanding of potential impacts in the way that we assign exposure to women in the studies, so that we can accurately measure what is the association that is brought about by being exposed to extreme heat. So I'd like to acknowledge the funders of the work, the heat study team, Place Alert Labs, Midland State University, which is associated with the Precise Study team, that are affording me the opportunity to get exposure in training and geospatial methods. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claude Kamau, and my affiliation is Strathmore Law School, Nairobi, Kenya, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where I'm a doctoral fellow under the DSI Law program. My presentation today has to do with one of the facets of my doctoral research, which looks at the legislation of benefit sharing mandates in Africa. And in view of my background, I'd like to apologize in advance to everyone in the room for the absence of charts and graphs in my presentation. So the intention of my current analysis is to frame the ethical and legal debate on benefit sharing within the social and historical developments that give it context. Ultimately, the question is one of legislation. Should we legislate for benefit sharing mandates in biobanking and genomic research, specifically at the level of individual participants? So to achieve this, I thought it may be helpful to situate this discussion within frames of reference and identity, or what I have considered here to be subjectivities of the human person within the specific context of genomic research. And it appears to me that these social and historical contexts may be grouped into epochs, which are what you see represented here. So my analysis considers 6 such epochs or historical junctures, and analyzes the development of ethical, legal, social, and scientific realities or phenomena throughout these epochs that are relevant to genomic research and benefit sharing in that context. The point of origin is the conception of the Human Genome Project in the 1980s. At this point, the formative work on the concept of subjectivities is that of the French philosopher, Michel Foucault, who provides us with the first glimpse of the idea. So Foucault understands subjectivation as a formational and transformational process in which individuals are subjected to a specific form of self-reference and reference to others by virtue of the forms of rationalities and systems of governance within which they find themselves. So this understanding of subjectivity, together with the understanding of the Human Genome Project pioneers, is important to situate the notions of DNA as the blueprint of human life, right? Together with the human genome as the common heritage of humanity. So at this particular point, we have an understanding of the individual in the abstract sense as part of the of humankind as a general category. Nonetheless, the individual in this abstract sense finds some kind of application in this context in view of the benefits they can receive hypothetically. The second historical juncture is characterized by gene litigation. This is litigation regarding royalties in genomic research and gene patents. And at this particular point in time, in the mid-2000s, we begin to see the assertion of the individual in the concrete sense. So the individual is demystified and, more crucially, seeks to assert individual rights in intellectual property in genomic research. So the fourth historical juncture is characterized by the proliferation of new genetic technologies, such as direct-to-person genomics, which introduces the first set of commercialization in genomic research, giving a different identification and reference to the individual as a uniquely self-interested actor. So finally, we have the contemporary period within which we find ourselves, which is the information age, the data age, the proliferation of neoliberal notions in genomics and the democratization of genomics. So the question I'm asking is, what does this understanding of the individual mean or have to, tell us with respect to whether or not benefit sharing should be appropriate for the individual? And in closing, my analysis speculates and predicts the implications of these subjectivities. And perhaps counterintuitively, this analysis expects that despite its significance, these transformations of subjectivity alone may not be sufficient to ground benefit sharing mandates specifically for the individual, although there may be a bit of success at the institutional or meso level and the national or macro level. Thank you.
Right, so the floor is open for the presenters for questions. There's a question over here.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask the second last speaker who was talking about the heat. Now, I wanted to know whether is there a specific time that you take the heat temperature, or is it open? Is it the whole day? Just like the way you had specific locations for where the pregnant expectant mothers are. Is there a specific time that you take the heat measurement? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So we are going to collect various temperature measurements. For example, from Landsat, the satellite, we can actually derive the daytime and the nighttime temperature. And then for the other satellites, maybe just the day temperature will be available. So we're also going to look at the differences that we're going to see, whether we compare the day and the night temperature for the various sources.
Yeah, a question for Aliki. If I'm understanding what you said right, you fine-tune ChatGPT with volumes of South African law, which is great if you're in South Africa. Is it, or did you not do that, or?
No.
Oh, Okay. So how did you fine tune it? And I guess the question I was getting at is, and maybe I'll just ask it in a more general way. Since laws vary from country to country, even within countries, how do you know, how does ChatGPT know that that you're answering the question correctly based on where you're sitting?
I think that's a very good question. Just to explain that, we've created a chatbot. It's an AI-powered chatbot, and it makes use of GPT-4 for its natural language processing. So it's only trained on the data that we have given it, and the data we have trained it on is the Data Protection Acts of the 12 jurisdictions which we cover. And so it will therefore be able to give you information about those data protection acts in 12 jurisdictions. So we've tried to make it, because we understand that really the biggest issue is cross-border data sharing. And so a lot of the questions people have is around, how do I transfer data out of Kenya, for instance? And now literally you would go into the bot, you click Kenya, and you ask, how do I transfer data outside of Kenya? And it will pull up from the act. So it will use a little bit more layman's terms. We haven't excluded all of the more technical terms, just because unfortunately those technical terms actually have legal meaning. And so that has been some of the struggle, is to decide how much of it to make layman, how much of it to retain the original. But it does have sources at the end that takes you to those data protection acts. And we are going to be integrating this after this beta version. So that's why we want scientists to make use of it, so that they can give me feedback on the kinds of questions they'd ask it, because ultimately we've had law students asking questions, might not be necessarily what you would be asking, and not in the way you would be asking. And so that will help us fine tune it with guides, country guides that we are writing up that will be very much tailored to the scientific community, science advice, and it will be able to then pull up from that information and give you a far more holistic response that is very scientific and specific. But currently, it's going to be able to tell you about those data protection acts. So it's the beta version. So that's really what I'm hoping that everyone's going to get on board to just try out and help me fine tune for this DSI Africa community. So thank you.
Any final questions? I know we are standing in front, in between you and lunch. All right, then please give a round of applause for this round of presenters. Thank you very much. So lunch is ready for us, and we will reconvene at 2:30. There will be a group picture now just before lunch. The group photo, I suspect it will take place by the marquee tent, but we will inform you as we go along now.